And then how long did it take for us? Less than an hour for coming up with this content. Make sense? All right. So with that, we're going to fall back to our regular content, and we're going to start with JavaScript for today. I'm going to add a couple of documents to this. I'm going to call it app.js. For hosting this, we'll require a page. I'm going to call it index.html. Over here, I'm going to add some default text. I'm going to call it day 4. And I'm going to link this JavaScript file with this particular document. You don't link JavaScript using the link tag, you use the script tag and you provide src and it becomes app.js. Just to see everything is working fine, I'm going to come to this file, type console.log, and I'm going to say hello.js. Let's turn on the live server and it's going to launch day 4 index.html. Nothing appears here because the body is empty, but inside console we are going to see hello.js. So JavaScript is working fine. And then this is where we're going to begin our discussion for the second day. Let me open up a couple of documents. So JavaScript is a scripting language. In the gamut of technologies that we are looking at, HTML, CSS, JavaScript completes the picture and it provides dynamic behavior to the website. It's a cross-platform technology, it is object-oriented, and it is specifically built for web pages. But then with the advent of Node.js and technologies like Node.js, JavaScript has expanded its horizon and now it is also used for server-side coding through Node.js. JavaScript and Java, they have similar syntax, but then there is no other connection. They have similar control flow structure, they have similar variable declaration thing. They are object oriented differently, but they have some similar features, but they are not the same language. So object oriented programming inside JavaScript is through prototype, but then inside Java you will have to declare class. I don't think JavaScript has a class keyword, so for declaring for doing inheritance, you will use a property on each object called prototype, but then that is very tricky. And then with TypeScript, I have started drifting away from JavaScript because TypeScript makes syntax for JavaScript a little straightforward. There are two places where you can run JavaScript. One is inside one is inside the console window. Like over here, I can type console.log and say 10, and it's going to print 10 on the screen here. So this is one of the places where you can run JavaScript. The other place is if I let me show it to you. I'm going to right click on this file. I'm going to click on open integrated terminal. Now I have Node installed on my computer. If you don't have it, if you want to install it, you can use our trick from day one to go install Node.js, and then if you hit enter, it is going to pull the Node.js repository and install it on your computer. Once you have that, you can run a command like this, node, and it's going to give you a stack. It is going to give you a command prompt to execute node commands. I'm going to hit exit, I'm going to hit quit, I'm going to hit control D. So control D got me out of it. I'm going to clear the screen and I'm going to run a command called node. Now I am forgetting the next part, but then let's see app.js. Alright, so with Node.js installed on your computer, if you type node and give it a JavaScript file name, it is going to execute that code for you. This is the same output that we saw over here in the console browser. The reason we are able to execute JavaScript inside Node is because the Google Chrome browser and Node.js, they are both built using the same framework. It is the same engine, if I remember the name right, it is the Chromium engine for running JavaScript. It is in the version number 8, or probably Chromium is for the Chrome browser. But then the engine that runs JavaScript for Google Chrome is the same engine that is also running Node in the background. It is the same piece of code. We for we are going to avoid using Node.js for this course because that is going to be a course in itself. We are mostly going to rely on the browser window. We're mostly going to rely on the browser window and this console section here for our the work that we are doing. With that, let's move on to the next section. And we already saw a couple of things yesterday, like declaring a function. So if I come to the app.js and paste a code like this, right, and we know that we have already linked this, and everything that we write here gets executed. So if I come to this code now and hit refresh, notice that there is nothing in the console. Even if we have an alert sentence here, but then if I copy this, come back to this, I don't have this parameter provided yet. So if I hit enter here, it is going to show me the alert, which means that the code that we have written inside the function, this is fine, but we have not invoked this function yet. And the way to invoke that is I copy this greet me and provide some name to it. Now if I come back to window, because live server is kind of refreshing this page every time, it has popped up before we could do anything. But now if I refresh it, our JavaScript is going to get executed. It is going to call this function greet me with this parameter, and it is going to invoke this thing. There is another trick for invoking this, and it is called immediately invoked function expression. So let me just type that here. Immediately invoke function expression, IIFE, and it is read as IFE. One trick that I have showed you some time back, when you come across such big terminologies, you should divide them in, you should start eating them from backwards. So immediately invoke function expression. The definition of this is an expression which will invoke an expression that will call a function immediately. So this invoke is going to happen immediately. If you read it backward, it's going to make sense. And the syntax for that is that you put this function inside round brackets, and outside these round brackets, you put another pair of round bracket. Now it is expecting a parameter. Let's just go ahead and get rid of that parameter. I'm going to show you the trick with the parameter later. But this function is going to invoke itself, and you don't need a call like this. Right, now that it doesn't have parameter, we don't have to pass this, but then this is the older line. Let me go ahead and comment this and show you another JavaScript syntax that double slashes. They're going to comment the current line or from current line onwards, and this is a multi-line comment, so anything between asterisk and star is going to be commented, and this text is going to be ignored. I'm going to delete that. Now if I go back to browser, it is saying hello undefined because I still have your name inside inside the alert message. We're going to fix that real quick. But if I refresh, you see it is hello. Probably that was from some previous execution. So we just have hello present here at the moment. If you want to pass parameter to such function, you just say name, and then you want to pass that name here inside this thing. So this is actually a function call. Greet me, the second part after greet me is this particular thing here. And now if I save it, it is displaying my name. Right? So this is how you declare a function inside JavaScript, and this is an easy program to begin with. But with that, let's go ahead and study a couple of things. one of the one of the ways of one of the building block of a programming language are its variables. Now, there are three ways you can declare a variable inside JavaScript. One is using the var keyword, the second is the let keyword, and the third is the const keyword. We're going to look at all these one at a time, and let's begin with var first. So if I declare a variable var with an a and do console.log, value of a is a, and I print this. Now if I now for the most part we are going to stay inside the console bar. The value is undefined. Undefined is a data type um, in JavaScript. If I modify our code, come back to this and initialize a to 10, we're going to see that value over here. The reason var keyword is interesting is because it uh, it is scoped for the entire document, right? And then that feature is called as hoisting. But so now if I okay, let me declare a variable that does not exist. So when we created that initial, go back to this example, it'll make more sense, right? When we have var a and we run this code inside browser, it is going to say value is undefined, or let me change this value to a is undefined. Make sense? But if I delete this line, it is not going to say that it is undefined. It is going to give you an exception, uncaught exception. A is not defined at this particular line, and there is a way I can change that output. I can declare a as a variable after I have used it already. So when I declare it and go back to the browser window, console, it is saying that a is undefined. Now, having this line above or below where it is getting used, it is not affecting the output of this line. Make sense? Let's go ahead and do a third experiment. We had assigned value 10 to it in the past. Because JavaScript doesn't care where the variable is declared, it is going to pop up the element to the top of that block, that function or that file, and it is going to fix all the references. It's going to say that it is undefined. Let's see what happens to a statement like this. Let's see what happens to a statement like this. And the output is still undefined. Let me refresh just for your reference. Right? It is still undefined. When JavaScript pulls the definition var a at the top of the I don't know if it is document or function, but then if it is going to pull it up, it only pulls up that it is defined. It does not assign any value to it. Now the reason for this is not clear to me, but then I am assuming that because JavaScript doesn't care about data type, it is not a statically typed language, it is a dynamically typed language, and that is another difference between classic Java and JavaScript. So if I write a statement like this, JavaScript doesn't mind. They're like, hey, a at this point was actually a number, which is fine, but then from this point onward, it is going to be a string. And an easy way to see that is we write another console.log statement and call it type of a. I'm going to repeat this line. So now when I come to this console, it is saying a is undefined, but then type of a, after we assigned 10 to it, it was a number. When we assigned hello to it, the data type of a changed to string. So JavaScript is a little forgiving when it comes to the value that you want to store in that particular variable. And this is exactly what TypeScript fixes. TypeScript, through interpretation at the compile time or at the time of coding, it is going to uh, tell you if you are making any type related mistakes, and that is where it starts becoming a little powerful, a little helpful with the programmer. Okay, so we saw 3 error messages. If I have to put everything together, our code is going to look a little bit like this. So we declared a variable, we did not assign a value, and the output that we got was it is undefined. We used a variable, and then on the next line we declared the variable, and then it was still undefined. When we did not have the variable name to begin with, this is when we got a JavaScript error message. Just because we defined a variable, just because we declared a variable, it doesn't mean that it is also going to get initialized. It does not initialize that, right? The other type of variable that we have is let keyword. So if I type something like this and do console.log and say x plus x, our output is going to be very similar. X is still undefined, but it is not initialized yet. Let's see if let will let you define it after it is used. And then when we do this, it is saying that cannot access x before initialization. So let's see if we can initialize this variable and see if that helps. Even that doesn't help, right? So if you the let variable is not going to get hoisted. The word hoist comes from dictionary, right? It is called JavaScript variable hoisting, and hoist is something that is going to pull it back up. I have seen hoist in a different sense. So this is hoisting, where you pull water from a well using this pulley mechanism. Everything is going to kind of jump back up, and this is that's a word, hoist. So JavaScript does hoisting only on var. They don't do it on the variables declared with x. So we're going to move this up. We're going to fix this and check our output again. So x is defined as 10. Let declare this variable. We initialize it to 10, and now I can also go ahead and modify this particular value. So if I assign x to 20 um, and see the output, we're going to see 2 lines, 10 and 20. But let's see if we can do this now. All right. So the variables that are declared with the let keyword, even they are even they are dynamically typed, and you can assign different type of data to it all. I wanted to do one more thing. The third type that I wanted to see was const. When we do this, we are assigning 10 to it. Now let's go back and see the output. So the first line went through fine. For the second line, we saw a type error, and it is saying assignment to constant variable. Okay, so depending on what kind of work or programming you are doing, you are going to pick these variables. I'm going to recommend that avoid using the var keyword and start using let keyword more often as you are writing your JavaScript programs. Now the next type is an array. So let's come here, declare an array, and the way to declare that is through square brackets. And then let's see what is the data type of x. What is the type of x? So if I come and do this, console is not a function. Yep, I have to write console.log, and then array is an object. All right, I'm going to pull up another function. There are different elements that you can declare inside an array. We're going to see array more closely in in the coming sections, but for now, let's go ahead and look at this particular program. So we have declared a variable x inside the if block, and then we are trying to access it inside console.log, and then the output that we're going to get is 5. So the scope of a variable, when it is var, it is not limited to those particular set of curly braces. It kind of bumps up, and it is accessible outside as well. Let's change this to let and see what happens. and it's going to say that uncaught reference X is not defined. This was the same error that we used when we deleted the var and the let lines. This is what we are getting because let blocks your scope for that particular set of curly braces, that particular block of code, and it prints them here on the console. Moving on. So the way variables excuse me. So the way variables are hoisted, let's see if function name can also be hoisted. So I'm going to pick up this example. I'm going to come back to this code. We are calling foo function and we are defining at a later point with this particular statement. And then when we run that code, JavaScript doesn't care where you declare a function. You can reference it anywhere in the code. And that's why we are seeing this particular output. There is another expression. There is another expression that you can use with function declaration, and it is called as expression body function. There is a specific term for it. It's called uh, function expression. I was confusing it with the C# terminology, but it's called function expression. Now there are two ways you can declare a function. This name foo here is the function name itself. There is another way that you can declare it, and it's called, say, var bar assigned to function, and inside this function you write another statement console.log and you call bar. Now the trick with this is that because this is not a bar is not a function, bar is a variable, and that variable happens to store a function inside it, you can invoke that variable. And when I do this, we're going to see two output this time. One is okay, one is bar from the first uh, console.log, and then this bar here is from the second console.log. Now we were able to invoke foo before we actually defined it. Question to you is, can we invoke bar the same way as here, as before defining the functions? Let's go ahead and hit the save button and see what happens. The first bar is printing because of the foo function call, but the second is saying that bar is not a function, right? It is another way of saying that it is defined, but it is not initialized yet. JavaScript hoisting has found out that bar is present somewhere, but it has not been initialized. This is almost the same as saying bar assigned to 10, and when we probably say do console log, it is only going to say that it is undefined, but it won't be able to identify that particular value until it reaches this line. So a function expression is a way of defining function where you save a function inside a variable, and function and then function name is a way of defining the function itself, and then you can start using this name anywhere in the code even before this line has been reached or executed. All right, so these are two separate ways of defining functions. We have already seen constant. At this point, I would want to take a quick diversion and talk about data types. This discussion is going to get repeated in the second week where we talk about uh, programming when we start with the C# section. But then for today as well, I would want to have this discussion with you. What is a data type? So some examples that we can do is we can say that integer is a data type, char is a data type, string is a data type. Um, there are, say, Boolean and multiple other answers to it. The point is, what is the difference between an integer and a char and a string? How are they different? So an integer has a set of operations. So when I write a statement like this, we would know that this is 3 because this integer 1 has an operation addition available on this particular uh, data type. But then when I do this, the answer is a little questionable because this is not a standard operation that we perform on characters. When we learned letters in the English language, this is not what we learned, that how do you add two characters, right? We generally put them together, but depending on the programming language and how you are storing these variables, if I typecast it to something else, it is going to give you a different result. The point that I'm trying to make is data type is two things. One, it is going to give you information, and two, it is going to give you a set of operations. The information is how it is stored inside computer, and the operation is what what actions you can perform on that particular information to create uh, to to get something done, right? So data type is combination of two things. One is information and second is operation. These data types, they are not always enough. So what you do is you start putting these data types together and then you come up with a new data type. So suppose if you want to save student information, you don't want to declare 4 different string type variables, one for say the first name, for the last name, for the address, and things like that. Because they are logically connected, they should be part of the same object hierarchy. They should be they should be contained together in as one unit, and then that unit is going to define the first name, probably the last name, and the address. Make sense? Now we have figured out when we declare a variable like this inside curly braces, we have sorted at least one problem, which is how the information is supposed to be organized, right? What we can also do is we can define a set of operations that you can do on that particular data type. So suppose update first name. This is a function that I would expect a class like this should provide me. That for some reason you would want to change update the first name. You're going to call this function, you're going to pass it the new name, and the new name is going to take effect or change the data type. So the operations that you would want to perform on integer is addition, negation, subtraction, multiplication. Uh, the data types on character that you want to perform is say combining those two characters, coming up with a string. The operations that you would want to perform is probably find out length of that particular string and operations like that. But then when you start putting these things together, creating a new data type, the official terminology for this is abstract data type, ADT. An abstract data type gives you a pattern of storing variables, and it also gives you a set of operations that you would want to perform. Right? And we are going to attempt and declare, sorry. So we're going to attempt and declare something similar for our usage as well. I'm going to pick an example of car and define that car over here like this. Now, car probably has some information that you want saved. Let me just go ahead and delete these fields. A car has a make. I'm a fan of Toyota. I'm going to put Toyota here. It has a model. I like Camry a lot. I'm going to put Camry here. And then the syntax is going to be a little different. You're going to put the equal sign. You're going to put a colon here, and this is a car data type. Now the way to access that once again is that you can come here and type console.log and type car here like this. Let's go ahead and see what output it produces, and it is printing all the members that we have defined inside this particular thing with the same name. What if I just want to print the make of the car? So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to, for simple reasons, I'm going to call car.make, and when I come and print this, when I come see the output, it is going to print Toyota for me. there is another way in which you can print the make of the variable, and that is if you use the square brackets and inside the string value here you provide make. So this make is this particular value here and car is the object. If I now go and see the output, it is going to print Toyota as well. Now this is a lot more text compared to this example here. But then the reason you would want to do it this way is because in some cases you would not know the member name that you want to print. So I don't know what we want printed on the screen, and that's when you're going to use this syntax. So now probably it'll make sense that you at through programming you identified a member name, and in that member name could be passed as an index through the array operator on this car member, and it is going to print exactly the same thing as the other syntax. So it is printing Toyota in both cases because the key that we are passing here is make and the member that we are accessing here is make. Now if I want to print model, that output is going to change. So it is now Camry and Toyota over here. Okay. Alright guys, let's take a quick break here and then we're going to come back again at 9:30. Alright, see ya. Alright guys, let's get started. So what we have done here is we have defined a complex variable which has at least two more nested variables inside it. It is a form of declaring variables, defining the internal arrangement of those members, and using them for storing information in a as one single container. So with that, uh, I would probably want to switch discussion to arrays at the moment right now. Hmm. One thing that I would probably want to show you in this example one more before we move on is uh, we have seen the variable const, and then if we try to modify the variable of const, it generally gives you it'll give you an error. But with when you have a complex type which has members inside it, that equation kind of changes. So if I try to change the make or model of the member from Camry, I say switch to Corolla and change this. And now if I do console.log and type car here, notice that I'm allowed to change the model. Now a const x equal to 10 console.log x is going to give me an error when I do this. Right, it is saying that it is not allowed, but so I'm going to comment this out. But a constant with a complex variable uh, with members in it, you can modify those members, right? It was initially, let me print it twice. It was initially Camry, and then with the second statement, it changed to Corolla. So constant variable itself cannot change. I cannot assign this car to a new car. I cannot assign this car to a new car. Something like this. I'm forgetting the syntax, but let me go ahead and do this. This is not allowed, and we're going to see an exception that until this point it was changing member variables. From this point onwards, it is not doing that, and it is pointing to this particular line here. And then probably I should have showed this to you earlier, that when you click on an exception, it is going to open in the source tab of the developer toolbar, and it's going to show you exactly where we are getting that error. And it is saying that assignment to a constant variable. In fact, we didn't have to be even this complex. We know that JavaScript is a dynamically typed language, so I can assign the car to 10 as well, and our error is going to stay the same. Make sense? So with that, now switch to arrays once again, and I'm going to do this. Var x is an array, and if I print the type of x, it is going to print object. Because console is not a function, I keep forgetting the log function name. So when we do this, go to console, it's going to print that it is an object. With that, the way to initialize an object is, the way to initialize an array is you can start putting different content inside uh, inside this square bracket and separate it by comma, and it is going to have two separate elements inside it. So if I now come to this and type console.log and type x, what you're going to see here is these two elements. But if I want to print a single element, I can do this as well, and it's going to print HTML. Now, JavaScript being dynamically typed language, you can do a lot of things over here. Let's go back to our car example. I can have car present here, and now if I log x, it is going to give us everything. So inside one array, I can save different data types. I won't recommend doing this, but this is possible. If you have specific requirement, or if you have something, if you have a solution that would require this kind of arrangement, you are free to do that. JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. It does not restrict even for the elements inside the array. Right? Let me look for a new topic. Another data type is Boolean, and then Boolean, say, condition is, it can be true or false. And if I say write console.log and type condition here, it is going to be, it is just going to print, I think it's complaining about something. Let's go ahead and click on this. So it didn't like the identifier. I'm not sure what's wrong here. uh, I'm not able to figure out. But let's move on, continue with our discussion with arrays. You can have an empty element inside an array, and then if you can guess the output over here, I'm putting my money on undefined, that when you run this particular solution, I've deleted car, so let me go ahead and clear that. If you go to console, it is printing empty here, saying that this member is not present. If I select index 0, 1, 2, if I select index 2 and print that, it's going to say undefined. But when we print this output, it is going to say that this location, this spot is still empty. Okay, so these are some tricks that I wanted to show to you about about arrays and JavaScript variables. Now, there are multiple ways in which you can declare a string. Let me go ahead and show all those to you. You can put them in single quotes, you can put them in double quotes. If you want to have a new line at some point, you can use the escape character slash, and then after that it is going to for this particular character is going to have special interpretation, and then you can definitely have single quotes inside a double quote, or probably a double quote inside a single quote. So these are all valid little strings. If I come and paste them here, they are all going to work. So foo is going to appear like this. 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to appear with a escape slash inside double quote, and then probably just going to appear on two separate lines. I don't know why it's doing that, but then let's go ahead and put a console.log statement here. I was hoping that it is going to, yep, this is what I was expecting from the console as well, but then probably because I did not have it inside console.log, it did not print that way. But then one line is above and another line is under it because of the slash n expression. So if you want to have special formatted output, yeah, you can do that. If you want to have multi-line string input, what you can do is you can declare something like this, like multi-line, and this character is to the left of one. It's called caret. I don't know. It's called something else. That is it is right below tilde. If you put this character, your input becomes multi-line. So this is line 1, this is line 2, this is line 3, and if I print this on console.log and type multi-line here, it is going to give us this multi-line output. So I'm sure that you would have requirements where you would want to do this. You would want to have separate lines. You can take this style. Next, what I want to show you is a couple of control flow statements. So if we have a variable like x, we can print the value of that inside this code over here like this, and it is saying that x is undefined. Probably I can put the var keyword here. Do not like that. I'll have to do this var x assigned to 0, and then now it is printing multiple lines. So if you want to perform an activity in a loop, you have the while loop, close cousin x. If x is less than 10, it is going to increment it and it's going to print it. It's going to print 1 because we started with 0, we compared, it was less than 10, so we incremented the value. There are a couple of other statements. You can do multiple if and else statement. I'm positive that you are already familiar with the syntax. Just for sake of clarity, you're going to put an else here and say console.log too high, and then let's make it 20, and it is going to go in the else loop because this condition here failed. give me one moment, please. There's a special JavaScript syntax for arrays, and then I'm looking for that syntax. All right. So it is not the arrays. I was looking at the wrong spot. It is called as object literals. So an object literal is a combination of key and value pair. It 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 has the syntax is a little like CSS property key value pair. So if I say uh, Coke, I can get Coke. If I want, say, let me change this to cold. I'm gonna get Coke, and if I want something hot, I'm gonna say coffee. And for default, I would want to say water. Okay. Now, if I let's go ahead and print this thing on console. The output is not going to be very different. When I do that, it is printing this particular output for me. It is the same key value pair that we entered. Now it starts becoming very interesting when you apply the index syntax to it. And if I come and copy and put cold here, okay, cold as it is looking for a variable called cold. We don't want that. We'll have to put it in double quotes. And when we do that, it is going to print Coke for us. The place where you're going to use this is when you have a variable which is say what beverage do you want. So you're going to declare a variable called type of beverage, and over here you're going to assign a value to it. If somebody does not choose anything, you can come and type default here, and then over here you can put type of beverage, and depending on what the user has selected, it is going to come up in this particular object, and it is going to reference that. Now this is the same as dot default because we declared different variables, but I wanted to show that to you that there's a usage for this kind of variables. If you start writing functions that take member of say type of beverage, then functions like these can do some good, can come in very handy in different type of programming. So you'll have to invoke this function. I'm going to have to call it print drink, and through print drink I can pass any data, any type of drink that I want, and it is going to print that output for me. So these things, they are going to come in handy because of the way you have declared your variables. All right. So I'm looking for some basic building blocks that I have missed. So we have already seen the while loop. Close cousin is the for loop. The for loop for each is C sharp. Once again, so there are for loops, there are do while loops. I'm not going to show those to you. The switch statement, I expect that you have enough programming knowledge to read those things. All right. I want to cover the last topic for today as functions, because functions are like very interesting when it comes to JavaScript. JavaScript does not have anything similar to class the way we have it in say C++ programming, C sharp programming, Java programming, but functions in JavaScript, they are the first class citizens. For most of the work that you do, you're going to start writing functions, and a function is a set of statements that is going to perform multiple operations for you. It is going to perform a task, it's going to do some calculation, it is going to do some form of logging for you. It can take inputs, and depending on what is the objective, it can have output as well, and then you can start returning things from it. And then there's a scope in which they're going to fall together, and they're going to start responding uh, to to the actions that are expected out of them. So a simple function that we can write. So we have written a couple of functions like greet message, but then it was just taking the input. So a function greet message, it would take an input and probably give an alert or do a console.log like this. But a function can do more than this. So if I have a square function and I take a variable, say x, this function can return the value of square of this based on uh, because of the syntax. So the way I'm going to execute that is I'm going to have to call the square function, pass it some value, and then see the output in the resulting window. Now, because we invoked only the square function, it is calling that. The greet message function is not going to get called. This function, we passed a value of 10. 10 got assigned to this variable x. Notice that we did not provide any data type here whatsoever. We did not call it bool. We did not call it anything. Uh, with that just one line. Okay, now it occurred to me that I was trying to declare boolean the wrong way. I should have declared it like this, and then that would make x as a boolean. So console.log x, and it would print false. Uh, the data type does not appear on the left. My C sharp got the better side of me. I declared variable the wrong way. All the variables start with only three words: var, let, and constant. If you want to declare a variable, just assign that data type to it. And then if I now see type of x, it is going to print boolean here. Okay, data type appears on the right based on the value, and is not part of the variable declaration itself. Okay, so we did not mention any data type here. Based on the value that got assigned, that we sent, it got assigned to x, and we performed the operation over here. Now we can make this thing. Um, let's change the syntax of this of square from a function declaration to let's change this from a function declaration to a function expression, and I'm going to move the square keyword var square over here like this, and that is not going to have any impact on the code that we are doing here because square is defined as a function. We will be able to use it the same way over here. There is a special syntax that I wanted to show you, and I'm looking for an easy example to explain that to you. We have we have already we've already defined the data type called char here like this, and through these square brackets we defined multiple variables, multiple members inside inside the char class. So the make and the model we defined here like this, and it kind of worked fine. So if I type console.log and print char here, look at this example, the variable char. This is something that we have already seen. It's going to print this particular thing. But like I said, functions in JavaScript, they are very interesting. There's a different way in which I can declare the same variable. So just for the sake of example, I'm going to leave it here on screen and just increase the font size a bit. So I'm going to leave this example on the screen here like this, and I'm going to do it a little differently this time. Instead of square brackets, I'm going to type a function over here, and all the members, the make and model, I'm going to declare them over here like this. Make is Toyota, and the model is Camry. Now, a function like the square function, it can return value. This time around, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to return a complex object over here. So the way we had make and model, I'm going to name it differently, and I'm going to assign make to X and model to Y. And I'm returning it as a part of function execution. So you see this. Now, if I come and declare a variable called Camry, I can call this function car, and it is going to assign Camry to me. Okay, so Camry. Now if I come and print Camry, notice something that happens in the output. So the function has two variables inside it, make and model, and in this return statement is the result is a returning object that we are giving, but we are making them point to these two particular members. And now if I print this car object, so I'm seeing an error somewhere. So function requires opening and closing brackets, parentheses. And now if I go to console, notice that we are not seeing make and model here, we are seeing X and Y, because that is what we are returning. Now it can get very interesting, because inside this object I can assign another function to another function inside this thing, and I'm going to call it, say, function update make. It is going to take a variable called new make, and over here I'm going to assign make as new make, and to Z I'm going to assign update make. Notice that I'm not putting any parentheses here because I just want to assign this particular variable to Z. With this, if I come and I'm going to log it once, then I'm going to use Camry.z, and I'm going to pass it a new value. I'm going to call it Honda. Let's once again print this. Now the car, this variable here car, is actually pointing to a function, and in this function at the end of execution is going to return this thing. Anybody who calls car is going to get a new object of this, and in this object has two properties and one function in it, X, Y, and Z. When we print Camry, we're going to see all these. We're going to see Toyota and Camry as the initial thing, and then when somebody calls Z function on it, it is going to internally point to this particular function and execute this statement on line number 11 and modify the name from Toyota to Honda. And this line here is going to show us that output. So I'm going to go back to the console and notice that nothing happened. Let's go ahead and debug this program. It is going to start here. When I refresh, the control is going to come here. I'm going to press the Alright, I'm not going to hit, I'm going to press this button here. And then notice that it did not go inside. because we are not invoking this. It is just a variable declaration that we are doing, and variable declaration here goes from line number 6 all the way up to line number 19. This thing is going to initialize this variable here, Camry, and then when we initialize that variable, it is invoking that function and it is initializing all these members. So it's going to assign value to make, assign value to model. This is not going to execute and it's just going to return the next statement. And when that happens, our Camry variable is ready. When we print it on console, we're going to see this. Let's come back to source, and when I would want to step into this, I would want to go inside Z and see the value Honda getting passed to this particular function over here. So I'm going to hit step into the next function. It came inside, and then for some reason it modified the value. So the new make, earlier it was Toyota, now it is Honda, and when it came back, it did not print what I was hoping. I was hoping that this Y here is going to get changed, this Toyota here is going to get changed to Honda, but then that didn't happen for some reason. But I want the point that I'm trying to make through this example is in our code, a function can have nested functions inside them. The outside function is going to act like this car object here. It is a way of defining a class in JavaScript where you can initialize a member, you can initialize a variable with this function, and this function from this point onward is going to act like you are declaring a class, and in that particular class is going to have member variables and it is going to have functions inside them. The functions that you want to expose, you can expose them through a return of object literal. It is the same thing that we saw when we saw the example of drinks, where there was uh, coffee and coke and water as three different drinks. It is the object literal that we use, and then through this object literal we can call those functions and invoke that functionality. For some reason my demo didn't work, but I'm going to figure that out and show it to you in our next session.